This is Taylor Garcia, author of Animal Husbandry. I'm a novelist, short story writer, essayist, and probably a pathetic poet. And this is The Written Scene.
Hello and welcome to The Written Scene. My name is Adam Greenfield. I am the host, among many other things. Just don't call me those names. We've got a very interesting and fun guest. I can't wait to talk to him. But before we get to that, if this is your first time here, welcome. What we do is we talk path and process of writing with writers and other artists that write. If you have been here before, welcome back. Please tell all the people, including your enemies, because fuck them. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Our guest today is someone that I really just met today, but I feel like after talking to him, there's this connection, this kinship, this same-minded thinking thing going. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him. So, Taylor, thank you for being here.
Adam, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
All right. So let's dive in. Let's start with some recent stuff. Your most recent book is Animal Husbandry. Can you talk a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah. So Animal Husbandry is a collection of short stories. And the log line would be men who are going through their own personal apocalypse as the world kind of decays around them. So the physical world is also in upheaval as men are also experiencing something major in their own life. I kind of like to describe it as Netflix's series Black Mirror meets the magic realism of Garcia Marquez or Carlos Castaneda with the sort of jarring voice of like George Saunders.
Ooh.
So a little bit of that satire, dark humor, sort of gut punch reality in the viewpoint of men, I think, who are, understanding what masculinity is now today.
Yeah. And that's changed. It's changing.
100%.
Because as a kid, some of the things I'm hearing today, we did not hear as kids.
No way.
I don't know. You're probably about the same age
About
as
the
I am.
same cohort,
So
yeah.
we didn't get that sort of training about what our feelings should be or how to behave.
Totally. Yeah. That is actually really like the launching off point of the book, which is to say that the rules have and are continuing to change for men right now, and men are struggling with it. Like men in general are like, holy shit, like I didn't realize all these things that are required of a man as sort of institutions decay, as the rules kind of change, and men are realizing this isn't dad or grandpa or great grandpa's sort of world. And so I think it's like you got to show up in a different way. And I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good thing.
We need it.
Yeah.
We definitely need it. Well, let me ask you this. In relation to writing, I heard recently, and I've talked to others about this, but in relation to writing, I've heard that men are reading a significant amount, a less amount of fiction these days.
Right.
What do you think is attributed to that?
Yeah, I think that's that's sort of an artifact of the idea that men have to still uphold that like machismo, like dominant, we've got to be the problem solvers of the world, right? I think there's that idea that you hold the world on your shoulders. And so this idea of going to fiction and things that are not real is like a luxury. So why should I give myself the luxury to read, a work of fine literature or poetry or, something entertaining versus I should be becoming the best version of myself. I should be reading self-help. I should be reading, biography, all those things. And I think there's a place for all of that.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that men just think it's sort of like, we shouldn't be doing that. And I think that's just sort of like stigma from, past lives,
Past lives,
Yeah, exactly.
Generations, past generations too. So the idea behind this collection, did you come up with it first, or did you write the stories and then realize that was where that was going, where all those were heading?
It was sort of after the fact that I realized that, like, wow, every one of these characters features a man who's going through some kind of personal upheaval or transformation, change. And so then I step back and I realize like, oh yeah, this is actually, because when I write, I think there's always a social comment, I think. And so for me, it became like, oh yeah, here's a series of different stories of men. And the comment is guys who are having to deal with like sort of revising their masculinity, right? And so it kind of came after the fact. And I think that's what kind of fit into this arrangement of sort of like, little mini episodes.
Yeah. Not to turn this into any kind of therapy session.
Please. Actually, I love therapy. So
me too.
We can go right there.
Yeah. Right. Well, I won't charge you anything, I promise. I don't take insurance anyway.
I won't charge you.
Yeah. Do you, as a kid, did you grow up with two parents? Did you grow up with that kind of safe household, or were you raised by one or the other?
So I'm from northern New Mexico, and I come from a large Hispanic family, Catholic raised, very that sort of traditional machismo family. I also come from a very big sort of, I guess, more on the matrilineal side, believe it or not, where I had a lot more female cousins. I had a lot more aunts. There was a lot of this sort of female energy around the family, raised by mom and dad. Mom and dad had somewhat of a, I shouldn't say somewhat, but definitely a dysfunctional relationship. That's sort of what my other short story collection is basically.
Parents, now kids.
Yeah, rehashing all that stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so I think certainly it was a traditional type of upbringing with this idea of like expression and expressive. So an ability to be expressive and kind of explore, because where I grew up, I mean, your cousins were your brothers and sisters. And so there's a lot of that, like, and I've always compared the family to like a stage. Like that's where you learn how to act. And my family has a lot of, colorful cast members and characters. And so I think that's where some of that came through in terms of like expression.
Yeah.
Right.
I was raised by a single mother and a very abusive father.
Okay.
And I'm very glad she raised me because I feel like I've got that empathy layer.
Yeah,
that
totally.
I could only have gotten from her.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of curious when I hear people writing stuff like this, talking about men or women or whatever, and the results of it. And usually that sort of stuff is passed down generationally.
Absolutely.
Even. So I was kind of curious about that. As a kid, what were some of the things you were reading?
So as a kid, one of my most favorite books, and this was like the Can't Put It Down. I remember, probably not so much a kid, but I remember being in ninth grade reading a novel called Bless Me Ultima, which is by Rodolfo Anaya, who is basically like the grandfather of Chicano literature. He's from New Mexico, and he wrote a story about Bless Me Ultima, which is basically a curandera, or like basically like a healer in the community. And it's a story of her godson and the relationship that they have, and the boy kind of seeing both sides of his family and how the family, his mother's side is very different from his father's side. He's got one side that's very spiritual. He's got one side that's very machista. He's got his godmother who's a healer, like a folk healer. And so I remember reading that and just literally could not get enough of it because it was so deep in like where I was from, such like a view of like the culture that I was raised in. And so I loved a lot of that stuff. And I think that's what led to Garcia Marquez and some of these other writers that really encapsulated this sort of like, is it real or is it not real? It's like, that idea of magic realism. So anything along those lines, when I was a kid, I used to love like anything having to do with like a sorcerer, a magician, like the old wise, like Merlin character, like
the Zant series,
yes,
or whatever.
Exactly. Something like something that's just like this idea of like, the wise sage, magician, healer, witch, wizard, stuff like that. Obviously Harry Potter came out after I was, much later, but I would have probably loved, and I have enough exposure to Harry Potter, but it's that kind of like, there's something about that was always exciting for me.
See, I didn't find the Murakamis of magical realism until later.
He's another, exactly.
But I started with like Raymond Carver. Like
Raymond Carver.
That was my guy, and I Tobias Wolff.
Tobias Wolff's amazing.
Those kinds of hard hitting, real life stories.
That's right. And I love that stuff too. I think that's the kind of writing that I think what I learned when I went to like get my master's was those kinds of writing. Like I immediately gravitated toward those, and then layered on some of that, like, mysticism, realism, magic realism kind of stuff. Yeah.
I love those stories. I love reading them. I love writing them. Like I can't get enough. I've got several stories that, I hope I get published someday because I actually really like them. I like their story, that magic realism type.
I love that you said Ray Carver. Yeah, he's great. Like there's just some of those stories that you're just, and I think what's so beautiful about those kinds of stories is they've got that like spare quality that just like punches,
Yeah.
And I think going back to the piece about, men in literature, there's so many great writers out there that I think men should be reading,
Yes.
Like
yes.
men should be reading Ray Carver. Men should be reading, Tobias Wolff.
You get empathy from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because those are such character-driven stories.
Right.
And they're faulty characters, but they have an arc, and that sort of thing is just good for real life too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what I was trying to do with animal husbandry is just get into a place of like, these guys are like pretty messed up. Like there's something really, like an aha moment or some type of like epiphany or tragedy, something that has really like arrested them and said, oh my God, life could no longer be this way. Now it's going this direction.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that MFA. MFAs, the masters. Do you I feel like with most writers, life experience is a big thing. So I'm kind of curious, how much of each, both this education and the life experience, do you think is needed to be a successful storyteller?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have like a healthy dose of life. I feel like, I went for the program when I was like already well into like my adulthood, years and years after undergrad. And I've like, this is the time. I feel like I have some more life experience. However, I've had even more life experience like since then. And so I think that you just have to experience life, and life has to kind of, punch you down and, whatever it has to do in order for you to be able to have the courage to share it and talk about it. And I remember when I first started that program, there was something that somebody said was like, we don't care what you write, just tell the truth. And I remember I was like, oh shit, I don't want to tell the truth.
You don't want to hear the truth.
I was like, you don't want to hear the truth. Like I don't, but I think I was scared of that idea.
Yeah.
And I was even scared of like sharing my own work. Like this isn't something I want to do. Like, it's so private. But then you get to the point where you're like, if you're going to be a writer and you really want to make a go out of it, you have to. Like that's what you're signing up for. And so the idea of like having the life experience and then the ability to say like, I want to get some training in quotation marks. I want to learn from other people. I want to have mentors. It absolutely works to have both of those things. Yeah.
Is there, I heard years ago, I think I was talking to my brother about this. We were talking about grad school or undergrad and then grad school or secondary, post-secondary, I guess. And he said that there should be at least a year's gap in between the two.
Sure.
And same with high school year gap, work, because it's going to make you really
a real person.
Yeah, that's part of it. But it makes you realize that an education really is helpful in certain ways.
For sure.
So that gap in between, I think, is also important between undergrad and grad school because, as you said, a lot of life can happen, especially in your 20s.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that was something I learned, especially, like, it was really funny because a lot of these MFA instructors, mentors would say, okay, you made it to your master's program and now you're just going to we're actually going to teach you we're going to unlearn everything. Like everything you learned in, high school English or whatever, if you have other degree, we're going to kind of just break all that down.
Yeah.
Like you're going to throw all that out because what you're going to do here is something very different. And it was in fact, I'll say it was my second semester that I was like, I'm done. I was like, fuck this writing gig. I actually wanted to quit.
Really?
Yeah. I've only tried to quit writing like twice or 3 times in my life. And that was one of them.
That was one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a mentor. She just like put me through my paces. She literally said, I think you should read Strunk and White.
Oh my goodness.
And just start over. I was like, are you
that's
literally
a
like
burn.
Yeah,
that's
it was
not,
a burn.
That's not a critique. That's
a burn. Totally a burn. And I remember, I think she was testing me.
Yeah.
And now we're like super pals. Like,
that's great.
Yeah, she's amazing. Like, but I remember at that time I was like, I realized how much of writing is a craft and how much of it is skills that you have to develop in order to, you can have that fantastic idea or that memoir or whatever poem, but you do have to like be able to tell it in a way that like, like again, Ray Carver, like when you said those, I was like, yes, like, because that's what the writing school taught me was like, here's how some people have done it, and this is why they've gotten where they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it is in the grammar, it is in the diction, it is in the punctuation, it is in these little details that, if you're paying attention,
And every word can matter.
Totally.
Every word can matter. I had a professor in undergrad school who said, we were walking out of class, and I went to undergrad in my mid to late 20s, and we were walking out. It was a night class, and we're walking back to the cars, and he goes, I just don't see you as a writer.
Oh, wow.
And in my head, I was like, okay, you can kiss my ass.
Yeah.
But then my very next thought was, I'm going to prove you wrong.
That's fuel.
Yeah. I was like, okay, we'll do this. I wish he would have done it a different way.
Yeah.
Like there's a better way to do that.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older, I really don't appreciate when I hear those things,
Yeah.
There's
The
better
old,
ways.
like,
Yeah. Right. There's better ways to say, hey, you have potential, but you've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
But that was, I think, that didn't make me want to give up.
Of course. Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
It drove me.
I think, you need those people or experiences just to kind of like grab you and jar you a little bit. And I remember with Laura, my advisor that semester, I kind of in the moment knew what she was doing, but it was a test of my resolve, like, did I want to continue down this path of being a writer? Did I want to put in the work that is needed in order to do it? Because I always thought I had this gift or this ability to tell stories and all that. And then, when you interact with a person who's done it, who's been through it, who's been through the challenges that have to go into it to become, and again, not even successful, but just to, you do have to kind of realize like there is a little bit of that, like, not proof, but just, I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to quit.
Of those two times, what brought you back?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of that one with her. I think that was a semester where, was it the essay semester? I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was just this idea that like, I've invested so much of my time into this. It's something that I can't quit, but the time piece wasn't as big as like, I can't just stop being creative, I'm always going to see the world in this like eyes of like, this interior world, this like character intrigue, plots, and, like, that's just how my mind kind of works. And so even if I were to say, I'm not going to write anymore, like, I'm not going to write, I'll always be thinking either, in a literary or a cinematic way.
Right.
Or a poetic way, so I wouldn't be able to like shut it off. Like it just doesn't turn off.
We've trained ourselves to almost eavesdrop so we can have stories and characters.
Yeah.
And that, if we're not writing, that doesn't stop.
Exactly.
We're writing or not,
Yeah.
I've had numerous corporate jobs over the years and other non-corporate jobs, but non-creative work. I'm 50 now, and every single one of those hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
totally.
It just mentally hurt. I was like, what am I doing right now?
Yeah.
And then I sit down and write. I could write for an hour and it feels like the greatest thing ever.
I know.
You know? And I think, was it W. Somerset Maugham was like, we do not write because we want to, we write because we have to.
Totally.
And it's right. We don't have a choice. We are here. We are in it. This is what we do. So
is it Dorothy Parker that said like, I don't like the act of writing like having written? Who said that?
Oh, I remember hearing that.
Dorothy Parker. Anyway. Yeah, because I love writing as well. Like I love to sit there and write. It's just the feeling afterward where you're like, it's all out there now.
Yeah, it's like a fresh shower in a way.
It's all out there.
Yeah. Do you feel the same about editing as you do about writing?
Oh my God, I love editing.
Do you?
Let me tell you. So I used to be in high school, I was like, journalist and did was editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. And so I think and I was a journalist after high school, so after college rather. And so I love the process of like feedback and a marked up paper.
Yeah.
And I learned how to mark up my own paper. I learned the difference between like a rough draft and a final draft. And so there's nothing I love more. Like I literally love, like get the story out of my head. It's on paper, print it out. I print it out on paper and I just go through and I start editing and I just line by line, punctuation. And I love that stuff. I love, 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 love it. I don't know. I really do.
I like the second draft. Subsequent drafts start to annoy me after a little while, because then I'm just like, I know something's missing. I just can't get there.
Else. Yeah.
But I heard recently, this is a future episode in a conversation I had. So you guys listening now will get to hear this again in the next episode. But I heard an author say that he outlines after he writes the first draft.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Never heard that.
No, me neither. But when you think about it, it makes complete sense because what he does is he takes the story, gets it all out, then does the outline of that story and says, oh, I see where the holes are, or I see where I've done too much, or I see what's missing and where it has, and then he can write his drafts after that. And I thought, what a genius way of doing it.
I mean, I've kind of done similar now that I think about it. I was using this program called Scrivener.
Yep, Scrivener, yeah.
Scrivener allows you to do something like that, where you can kind of like board it out. So I think there's a way where I've done, especially for a novel, like my first novel, I got super lost in it.
Yeah.
I just was like, I don't even know where I'm at. So I did have to kind of like go back and plot it out in like a very technical way so I could see it. So that did help.
It did.
Short stories are a little different. I think short stories, for me, I think short stories just kind of like, they're just there. They just exist.
Yeah.
And then they end, and that's, for me, that's kind of nice.
I love that. Yeah. That's what I love about short stories. So,
they're just they're just sort of like one take.
Yeah, right.
They can be.
Well, speaking of that, at what point do you consider a story you wrote to be done?
Oh, that's a great question. This is what I really struggle with. When I was at my MFA, I really struggle with endings. I was like, I don't know if this story's done. I don't know if there's more to tell. And there was a lot of different like schools of thought within the school of like, oh, well, you just have to keep writing a little bit more and you'll find out. Or some were like, well, you just stop and that's when it's over. You
accept you're done writing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I focused on in my program, this is part of my thesis, was this idea of like ironic redemption, meaning a character can be redeemed in a sort of like ironic way. Like you didn't see that coming, but that's what they got.
Yeah.
And was sort of like, oh, now it makes sense, or maybe it doesn't make sense. But either way, it was something that was like sort of unexpected or not in line with maybe where the character was going. I think a lot of short stories follow that anyway.
Yeah.
But for me, when I found that there was like some type of ironic redemption, I was like, okay, it's done now. So there was a little bit of closure for me.
Yeah.
Like in Animal Husbandry, there's a story in there about a guy who's he's like a TikTok famous flat earther. And he is just like, the story is called Journey to the Center, Journey to the Edge of the Earth. And so he's super famous. He's got all these followers, and he basically like dupes his followers into taking a cruise to go look at the edge of the Earth. And this actually happened in real life, like just sometime this year, in real life. And he has a moment of like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this is just total BS, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that act of like understanding like his flaw, making sense of his flaw, and then at the end he has this other opportunity to like go on another talk show, but he just has this sort of like almost like a success failure. Like he fails, but then he succeeds because he realizes that he just helped his own mental health, in the process. So to me, that's like a little bit of like a ironic redemption. Like he got what he deserved because he was just a bullshitter.
Right.
But then he helped himself in the process, and now he can like move on with his life.
I love that. I love that.
That's one idea. Yeah.
I have a novel that's half written, and it's about a guy who's down on his luck, wants to just die, basically.
Yeah.
Drives out to the desert until he runs out of gas, and then just starts walking with a plan of just starving to death like
Wherever
a sick
it goes.
animal.
Oh, wow.
And along that process discovers an old underground bunker built by a crazy ex-NASA scientist, and that bunker is attached to a space shuttle. So he decides to learn how to fly the space shuttle and fly off into space and die that way.
Oh my gosh.
So you're like rooting for this guy to figure it out, but in the
Wow.
end, really what we're rooting for him is his end.
Mhm,
You know?
mhm. There you go.
And I kind of like that because it's both uplifting and sad. You know, there's
Totally.
a good balance in that
That's-
sort of idea.
Yeah, I think that's the best. That's again Tobias. Like
Yeah,
that idea of like, can you cry and laugh on the same page?
Right.
Like
Right.
if you can do that, I mean, you've done a good job. And so yeah. So I love that idea of like in one moment it's ultimate high, ultimate low. I think that's the true test of like how we are, who we are as people, the range of our emotions, and then just the I guess the range of a character.
Yeah,
You know,
it's real
like-
life.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
it's just up and down. That's what life is.
Oh my
It's a
God.
roller coaster. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
both of those things. And I think
Yeah.
putting that in a story makes it more. It allows the reader to connect, I think, a little better
Oh,
with
100%.
that sort of thing.
One of my mentors, her name is Pam Houston. I don't know if that name rings a bell. She would say, and I've heard this before in other iterations, but like your best day and your worst day are usually the same day.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Like you're going to usually find like life or happiness, joy and like sadness and despair usually are around the same time. And I remember thinking, and I've noticed that in my life, probably in the last 5 years, where things are just like, whoa, like it's literally like so up and down, and it's so extreme,
Yeah.
So it kind of
Yeah.
goes to that like happy, sad.
It's a good thing you're a writer then.
Oh God, I
Get
know.
it out.
Yeah, that's totally. Yeah,
It's a different kind of therapy.
This is the therapy session.
There really is, isn't it? So
Yeah.
you write novels, you write short stories, essays, and in some conversations with novelists, I've heard them say that the short story is enough space, and for short story authors, I've heard the novel is too much.
Oh yeah,
How do you determine if a story is short enough to be a short story or if it should be a novel?
it's a good question. I think I'll start with the short story. Like, this is actually some advice I received from. I went to like a workshop one time, and I was linked up with a workshop advisor, and she said something like, "You want to arrive late and leave early."
Mm.
And I remember thinking like, that's
How I go
interesting.
to parties.
Exactly, dude. I totally do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, come late and then you just like disappear.
Just be like, oh, I got to see him. All right, cool.
Make a fashionable exit. So, and this idea of like, how can you make something really like compressed in terms of time?
Mm.
So arrive late to the scene and then leave early enough that like either your audience is hanging or you something is revealed that you're like, okay, that made sense. So for me, that's where like short story comes in. Like
It's very Raymond Carver.
it's very Raymond Carver.
Yeah, he does that a lot.
Totally. Or like even Hemingway kind of experiments with that. Like this idea of like just a glimpse of that, scene or that, landscape or that character or whatever. Because the idea with short stories that I've learned is that your brain will fill in all the other reasons.
Yeah.
Like it will make up its own story and whatever. So that's kind of the short story. So I've learned to keep things really tight when I write the short story, but meaning, of course, I have like all this other backstory in my head. Like I know why they're acting that way or why that's happening that way, but that doesn't usually make it to the page.
Right.
So I guess in the context of like a longer, not like a novel, I feel like I still write very episodically in terms of when I wrote like a novel, like the one I wrote, that was actually ended up being a story within a story.
Okay.
So it's actually like a framed story. You're reading a story and then you're kind of jumping between two narratives.
Oh, I love that.
So
Yeah.
that helped me kind of like stay somewhat in like the world of like short story, like tell a little bit of a story, tell another little bit of a story. That kind of helped me there. But I realized over time, like this is a much longer story because it was kind of like a love story. And that one just felt like it belonged as a novel.
Yeah.
I haven't written a lot of long stuff recently. I'm actually working on kind of like a semi-autobiography memoir meets self-help book right now. That's very much more nonfiction.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I know that's just sort of like that's going to fit more on the like self-help memoir shelf. It's kind of in that. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a list of 20 short story ideas that I will draw from here and there.
Awesome.
Do you have something similar, or once you get an idea, do you need to write it?
So this is my interesting process. So like you said a minute ago, you said like eavesdropping.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm what's the word? Like I'm like a dust collector. Like I'm always picking up little scraps everywhere I go, whether it's
sponge, yeah.
whether it's like a little fragment of a sentence or like a little thing. And then I just have to let it marinate for a long time. For me, it's I don't know if this is why, I don't know if I can say if I love this or this is just the process, but like I really am good at, or I love bringing things together that just don't belong. And I think that's the whole idea of irony and ironic redemption. So like just a quick example. Here's an example. Like there's a short story that's been brewing in my head for months, and I haven't written a single word of it, but there's some elements that just keep popping up for me. I either see them or I think about them. One of them is like little libraries. You see these little libraries all over. So there's something there, something about little libraries. I also write about Mexico City a lot. I'm enamored with Mexico City. I love that city. So that's coming up. Then there's the idea of the high school prom, and something about the prom and like what it means or what it used to mean or what it means now. And then like as a subtext, the royalty. Remember there was always like a prom king and a prom queen,
yeah.
right? Like
yeah.
there's something there that's like, okay. And then
what it didn't have was the prom jester.
That's
very disappointing,
bro. You just
threw another idea.
I know there's another idea. and then the other one was, there's another piece to this that, there's a name. I won't say the name because it's kind of, but it's I'll just keep that name because I don't want that name to slip out yet. It's still part of the the mystery. But it's those sort of four elements that have just been like kind of bubbling up, and I just keep in a little note app, and I'm like, it's starting to like bubble more. It's like gonna get. It's something. And so it's just these idea of like very disparate things that maybe don't belong together,
sure.
but they belong together in some way. So what I like to do is find the thread, like, okay, I see how that connects to that, and that's going to be referring to that, and that character will do. And so that's how it kind of comes together.
Are you always writing? Are you always working on something? Because I'm curious with this process, it sounds like you would have to be working on something else while that is processing. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting there.
Just not writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of bubbling, brewing, marinating happening over there.
Yeah.
And that's a form of writing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a creative process there. But I'm absolutely always writing either something around like this memoir or some kind of journaling memoir. That's always happening. And then maybe one or two like creative works that I'm working on, that like either a short story or, as I mentioned earlier, I'm working on what is probably going to be like the screenplay or the storyboard of a potential graphic novel. So those are kind of always in progress, and I'll just open up a file. So I kind of have like two or three things going at once while the thing's bubbling and marinating and brewing, and then when that time comes.
So you mentioned before we started recording being able to read multiple stories at the same time. Now I'm finding out that you can write multiple stories at the same time.
Yeah.
How?
So,
because I don't know, I don't understand either of those.
Well,
because I feel like what'll happen is those things will start blending together. You know, my girlfriend and I will sit down and we'll watch it. We'll turn on a show. We'll start watch a few episodes, and we're like, "Do you want to watch something else?" And we'll start watching something else. And then the next day we'll be like, "Wait, was that in that show or that show?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that happens to me with books.
Yeah, totally with books. I will caveat by saying, I would say from like last year around December till about maybe May, I was like on the world's biggest like writer's block. I had just couldn't write. But in the past few months, I've it's just flowing out of me. And now I find that I have this like sort of larger capacity to write a lot more. And so the three things that I'm working on right now are distinct ones. You know, like I said, graphic novel potential. One is like it's actually, I'm experimenting with a screenplay right now.
Okay.
So that's another piece. And then this sort of memoir piece that I'm working on. And I'm finding they're all related. You know, they're all like the elements from here are popping up over here, and elements from here are kind of leaking over here. And I think that's just, if you were to kind of step back from like a writer perspective or process, you're kind of like getting toward a first draft of similar things, right?
Yeah.
Maybe different markets, you know, like screenplay over here with elements that resonate over here or similar to that. But ultimately, they are going to be distinct pieces. But certainly, I'm pulling from something over there, and it's fitting in over here, and that's just life.
Yeah.
I think So, but it is tough because I will say that if I start going down the memoir sort of path, I really have to switch gears and be like, okay, get back into that character of that other piece and remember what the goal is or what the objective is over here, and then likewise switching back over here. So there's a little bit of like technical adjustment that has to happen, I've noticed.
It's tough. I with the gaps in between an idea and starting the writing, as a poet, that was always difficult for me. I had to start writing it once I had the idea because it's about feeling.
Totally.
I could go back and clean it up later and maybe tap back a little bit into that feeling, but initially, if I don't pen at least a few lines to get the feeling into it so I can come back to it later, I'm never going to do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a little different with prose.
It is. I mean, poetry, because when a poem does spill into my head, it is like, oh God, I have to write like right now. I got to write that right now. It's before. With prose, I think you do have a little bit of room to kind of walk away and come back. But and I've noticed this especially with long form, like the screenplay to a certain extent, and then when I wrote the novel, like I had to keep at it.
Yeah,
I had to keep at it because it was almost like somebody made a metaphor one time when I was at a writer group that it's like when you're writing a book, if you don't write every day, it's like you arrive at the house and you like forgot your keys. Like, wait, where are the keys again? Like I'm looking for that entry, so so you have to live in it, and I remember that was with the novel. Like there was a point where I was like, I was investing so much time into it because that's how it had to come to life. But with short story, you can walk away. I think you can walk away a little bit. Let it get cold and, 2 or 3 drafts, kind of thing.
I think because you can see the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
It's all right there, as opposed to with a novel, it's you're looking at a chapter.
Oh yeah.
Which, among 60.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at one single thing, and that chapter can be the length of some short stories.
Exactly.
So it's harder to dive, I think, back into that. The consistency is going to be tougher to figure out.
The consistency pieces. Yeah, it's totally different. Yeah. So I've learned to, like I said a minute ago, arrive late, leave early.
Yeah.
That kind of helps. Even in like a scene. Like just get in there, get out, say what needs to be said. And then you embellish when you need to, but
sure.
Yeah.
What parts of storytelling do you find daunting, and what do you do to kind of get past that?
I would say kind of what I said a minute ago is the endings.
The endings, yeah. That's
the
one,
ending.
yeah.
I'm really good at beginnings, like something about that. Middle part's okay.
Middle part you can fill in.
Middle part, yeah.
It's the beginning and end.
Yeah, it's
really,
the beginning and end, yeah. I think that idea of like, when is it actually over? And then I don't know. This is something I would be curious, like what listeners think, or even what you think. Like, as writers, do we have to have a comment? Do we have to have a perspective? Do we have to have our own little take on something? And I think the answer is yes.
Okay, yeah.
That's my answer.
Yeah.
And so when I'm writing something, like I'm not like I'm saying like, well, this has to be a comment on that, but I want to make sure there's something in there, that there is a message, like there versus just like this is just a story for the sake of telling a story.
Right.
I do as a writer think that like there should be some message there. There should be something, not a moral, but there should be something that like people can latch onto and be like, okay, wow, like I understand the perspective.
I just a few months ago I finished a collection of some previously unpublished Vonnegut stories. And the introduction was written by Dave Eggers. And
love this.
And I'm reading his introduction, and he started talking about the difference of when he was writing versus the stories that are out now. And the difference is that when he wrote, he had a point.
Yeah.
He had an actual thing for you to take away from it, a thing to think about.
Yep.
Whereas today, it's storytelling. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of follows what you were saying.
That is, yeah. The fact you said Vonnegut's another one of my like gods of my personal like
these were. I see why they were unpublished.
Oh, really?
but they would be
Yeah.
unpublished now.
Okay.
They wouldn't be unpublished then.
Yeah, they just never made it to the not even to the B-roll.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's interesting because even now I think the way that people watch TV or the way they read or whatever, like I think sometimes people they don't want a message, they don't want a purpose, they just want something to
read.
watch. Yeah, like that's why a minute ago I mentioned Netflix, but and I talked about Black Mirror. That's one of the very few shows I watch on Netflix because sometimes when I watch Netflix, I'm like, this is all just kind of like Bud Light. It's all just sort of like very pedestrian stuff, you know, like, and so, but some people just want that. Like some people just want like, take me through the story and, ratchet the tension to like a 5. I'm cool with that, versus I want to read some Tobias Swift or Raymond Carver and get like the shit scared out of me
right.
and walk home with like, well, wow, like I have to be better.
The other night I went out, and when I go out at night, usually my girlfriend's not at home. She's usually working, but she happened to be home that night. She was really looking forward to being at home without me, because then she could watch the shows that you don't have to think, So she just sat here and just basically her underpants and just watched bad television and loved it, and I support that because there are times where I'll just put something on a podcast and I'll just walk around, and just to have noise, so I understand that.
Yeah.
I think though when I read, it's different. I don't just want to read nothing.
Yeah.
I need something.
Yeah. Reading's got to be, it's like a meal. Like if you're going to, take the time to sit down and read, like I feel the same way, like I want something that's going to be intriguing and make me think.
Right.
But then, certainly I want to like, enjoy something light every now and then. It's like appetite,
It's a palate cleanser.
Yeah, palate cleanser.
Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, in your time as an author, even with the education background that you have, have you encountered any beliefs or like notions about writing that you discovered are more myth than reality?
That's a good question. I would say more myth than reality. I mean, I think with writing, there's sort of this like mystique and mystery of like, oh, the writer that goes and like sits at a coffee shop and they're like gut wrenching, or they're sitting there smoking cigarettes,
pouring it all out.
Yeah, pouring it all. There's this idea that like writers, and I think a lot of writers do have that sort of like very like cerebral, like tortured mindset that needs to like come through. But I guess I've learned that writing is also like, you do have to kind of treat it like a job. You do have to show up to your workspace or your workstation, and you do have to do it, and so that idea of like it just being like mysterious and like it just flows out of you, I think rare. I think that's rare. Yeah. And like,
it does happen, but it's rare.
Exactly. And I think part of it, like as I've learned too, like I used to be really regimented with my writing, like 5 a.m. I'd get up and like write, and then, but then life happened, kids, and I realized that like, I just have to write whenever and wherever I can, however much I can, for as long as I can, to get something written and feel good about that.
Right.
And then, the construction aspect of it comes together. But the bottom line is, and this is what one of the other mentors taught me, was he goes, I'm going to give you guys 3 words and you're going to remember this. And he goes, ass in chair. He's like, you just have to sit down and do it. And I remember that was like, that was sort of like the this isn't like, we're all just like artists and we're just going to like be this, it's just going to flow. You actually have to sit down and do it. And so I think that's the more like myth reality, I guess, piece that I realized about writing. So
I mean, I've been trying to figure out if we really have to write every single day,
right?
And it seems like the answer is both yes and no.
Yeah.
There's times where it's okay to not write.
Totally.
In fact, it's probably preferred. Yeah. Take time off. Like,
of course.
As you say, it is a job. So take a day off from your job.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. But also, as you're saying, that everyday process keeps you in it, and it just, you continue to strengthen your craft by doing it every single day.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, I take breaks. I mean, I have every day on my calendar, I have a reminder, and it goes off at 12 noon every day, and it says write every day.
Yeah.
And there's days when I can click that thing like, yep, I did it. And there's like several days that I'm like, oh, I didn't write today. Like I didn't actually get something out of my head, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's just giving yourself that little bit of grace. And one of my favorite writers, Steve Almond, said, he goes, even writers go home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah.
you know, you got to go back and like, you know, sit around and do nothing and, you know, take your shoes off, and you don't have to be like always. So that is sort of the myth piece too, that like we're always just writing. There's always something that has to be said. And certainly there is. Like, I'm
sure.
sitting there like, because I work in, you know, we talk about jobs. I do work, my day job, I work in, you know, pharma. So I actually have a whole other persona.
Yeah.
And there's days when I'm just like, oh, this is just driving me crazy. I just can't wait to get back to the page and get back into that little place, because that's how my mind operates. But you do have reality. We have bills to pay. We've got to do things. We've got to live.
Especially here in San Diego.
Here in San Diego, exactly. Like, you know, when I moved here years and years ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to move to San Diego and be that writer and stay as a journalist. But I'm like, oh, I realize I have a lot of like bills to pay and, you know, life to live and pay for. So
one of the things I've done, which has actually helped me take it a little more seriously, I was already taking it seriously, but it added to it, is that when people ask what I do, I say I'm a writer.
Yeah.
Like that's the first thing I say.
Right.
You know, that way it's the first thing I think about.
Sure.
You know, what's your job? I'm a writer.
Yep.
I don't get paid from it a lot quite yet. I have other jobs, but those are jobs. That's not what I do.
Yeah. It's a smart distinction. Yeah.
So,
yeah. It sets the tone.
Yeah, definitely does. And that you wake up thinking you're a writer.
Totally.
It helps.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. I think I've been more mindful of that, I would say, in the last, probably post MFA and with the books being published. Like, I think, you know, that is within the first, you know, 30 seconds of like, who are you? Tell me a little bit about you, right? Like, I work here, I'm a dad, whatever, you know, father. I'm also a writer, you know, like that comes in there. But I think as you're saying, like, establish that right away, that does set the mindset.
Yeah.
And I know that's helped me when, you know, I think when I start my day, I've got all these things I have to do for my job, my day job stuff. I've got 2 young sons, so I'm always thinking about their needs. But I'm always thinking of like, there's going to be a point today where I'm going to devote to my craft, my gift, my skill, whether it's marinating and brewing or actually sitting down and getting something out on paper. Because as I've learned too, this is, I guess, the part of the other myth reality, is that if you don't set your life up in a way to do that, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
It's just not going to happen, you know? Because I mean, I'm sure as a writer, this has happened to you. You tell someone you're a writer and they're like, I've got this great idea. And they're just like, they're trying to recruit you to be your ghostwriter.
Right.
They're ghostwriter. And I tell them every time, like, I love your idea. And I think that's really great. But what I'm going to recommend you do is I'm going to recommend you start writing it, and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Because people just think it's just like this thing that just...
You go ahead, write it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I know. It's like, yeah, go ahead.
I know.
Sure. Yeah,
I was at a conference just a few weeks ago, and I hadn't seen a very good friend of mine. She goes, oh my God, I have an idea. And I was like, perfect. What I want you to do is I want you to take out your memo app on your phone and just start dictating.
Yeah.
And just pretend you're running your own personal podcast and tell the story, because you have a voice. I can't tell your voice.
Right.
You know, you've got to be able to tell your voice. So, or speak your voice. So
ghostwriting is a whole thing.
Ghostwriting is a whole other thing.
I could not do it. I know people that do it, you know, and they're very successful at it. I can't separate myself from that sort of thing.
Well, that's the thing. I completely agree. So when I was a journalist, I remember thinking, like, for some reason I had this mindset. I was like, oh, I'm like cheapening myself because I'm writing other people's stories.
Right.
You know, and it was funny because I was like,
it's like working for the man.
I was like working for the man, and also like because I was a journalist at my hometown in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I was writing, and I was on the sports beat for a while. So I was writing about like girls JV volleyball.
Yeah, right.
And I would, I remember I'd go back to the newsroom and write these stories, and I'm like, this isn't like what I want to write. You know, this isn't what I want to write. I'm telling other people's stories, and so that was sort of how I viewed it back then. I didn't realize it was just more training, but I laugh sometimes because it was just not the stories that I wanted to tell. So
I have a part-time day job that I don't like to talk about. But I guess I like the people I work with. I really do. It's the job itself that is just so non-creative. I do, though, get to work on like documentation.
Cool.
So there's a part of me that's like, all right, I'm doing some writing and practicing grammar, if nothing else.
Yeah.
You know, like
you're constructing
that down.
sentences. Yeah.
And now, whenever there's a question, I've been asked if I can help with a specific email that has to go out to everybody.
There you go.
Yeah. And so I'm the guy now that they come to and ask about grammar, even though they don't like the answers, because I fucking hate exclamation points. Stop using them.
Yeah, especially in business correspondence.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so I try to remind myself that I'm still doing some writing, but I also, on those days, I sit at that coffee shop a block away, and I'm like, I just want to be writing. I don't want to be doing this.
Of course.
Oh
yeah.
So
it's a safe place. I mean, it's a safe place. It's like a creative spot. It's home, right? It's just that little place you get to escape to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, it's also on your website, the curandero. Which is a healer.
Healer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What sort of healing nature and storytelling do you find on a personal level?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've sort of joked a little bit through this conversation that therapy, right? Like it's some kind of therapy, and I think writing is that.
Yeah.
I learned to write when I was very young, I learned to write when I was very young, but I also realized that like, oh, this actually serves a purpose to get out of my head things that I'm thinking about, right? And granted, I had a fairly traditional upbringing, but there were a lot of problems at home. There was a lot of dysfunction in the family, and I learned as that was a means to process it. And so writing has always served that purpose. And certainly with like in the last few years, my life has kind of really changed a lot. And so, continuing to go back to the page, continuing to journal, continuing to find ways to tell character stories through my own experience has been truly like a healing process for me, right?
Yeah.
And so I think in the world of curanderismo, which is this idea of like folk healing, folk medicine, there's the concept of what's called plática or platicar. That's basically Spanish for to chat or to talk.
Okay.
And so that's sort of one of the entry points, one of the many entry points of curanderia, which is basically like the first thing we need to do is just talk to understand if there's blockage in your mind, your heart, your body, because talking is going to be the first way to like, only your body, only your mind, your heart.
Right.
And so that's where you can sort of start to reveal. And so for me, writing is like that. It's the physical manifestation of that. Like I'm going to take these words or these thoughts or these feelings and put them in a page or in a journal page or a short story. And that's the deeply cathartic healing process that comes with it. And so
even if it's fiction,
exactly. So in the story, like for example, like these stories in this collection, they are all like, I look back and I'll read them. I'm like, wow, that's like a really close version of me, like experiencing something that happened, whatever. And I'm processing it through the eyes of this character or the actions of this character in this situation. And so that to me is like super, super healing, because you're shedding it.
Yeah. You're getting it all out.
Yeah. You're
just
shedding
cleaning it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've always said that I write poetry for therapy, but I write fiction for fun.
Oh, that's a really cool way to put it.
Because and I've also said that I prefer to ruin someone else's life and then fix that. I've ruined mine. I'm working on fixing it, and I'll do that through poetry. But in fiction, I can do whatever I want to characters. And
Totally.
and through that, though, as you kind of alluded to, through that, I'm adding bits of myself into the characters. And as I try to heal them or fix them or correct something in it,
for sure.
I can look at it and go, oh, okay. I didn't know I can do that too, I guess.
Exactly.
Kind of a thing,
Yeah, I think that's where we're right. I love how you said that because fiction and prose or whatever, it is sort of a playground.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of like, I'm just going to write about this and we're going to see where it's going to go and so it is very freeing and there's a lot of like fun that happens there, a lot of play.
Yeah.
So I love that. And that's healing.
It very much is. You said you were, in the intro, you said you were a bad poet or a failed poet or something. Yeah. But do you write poetry at all?
I try.
You try?
I try. Like, I try to like, I don't know, I guess I've always had a desire to write more poetry, and so sometimes like an idea will just pop into my head,
Yeah.
or I'll write in sort of like, instead of prose, I'll just write almost not like couplets, but just snippets. And I feel like this is sort of in the realm of poetry, because I really gravitate toward poems that tell a story. I mean, I think really good poems do tell a story. I think all poems tell a story anyway. But when I am inspired to write a poem or something kind of captures me, it is in this sort of like, mini narrative, blocky, not blocky, but every now and then I do. I just never had a poem published, or it's not. I take that back. Actually, the opening section of this book is a poem.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is one time where I've had one poem published. But I love to explore poetry.
Yeah.
That's pretty much. Yeah.
I don't hear a lot of people reading reading poetry these days.
Not many,
unless they're poets themselves.
Totally.
So I'm kind of curious if, we talked earlier about, there actually is, I'm calling it a problem that men are not reading fiction. And I feel like it's a problem that people aren't reading poetry.
Oh, for sure.
It's such an easy way to understand life. And I know that there's some poetry out there and people are like, I don't get poetry. And I think it's because, this is going to sound a little mean, but maybe they don't want to think.
Oh, I think so.
Maybe with fiction, it's all, the story is just right there. The prose is right there. They just can read it and they'll be told everything. Which is probably what upset Vonnegut.
Sure.
But with poetry, you kind of have to put a little effort into it.
Oh, yeah.
Reading and writing it.
Exactly.
So I think that might push people away from it.
Yeah, it's interpretation. So, what we were talking about earlier, like mindless television doesn't require you to do a lot of extra work, right? So poetry, reading it, and sometimes I remember when I was going through the MFA program, I was like, wow, I just don't get it. I don't understand what these poets are doing. Like, they're just different people and what they say. But over time I realized, like, oh no, now I get what it is. Like, it's all the things that aren't said. It's all the things that are sort of left for interpretation, that are left for you to think about and then resonate on, or it comes to you much later. And I think that's why poetry is so beautiful, because it does require you to work a little bit more. It requires you to think a little bit more. It's a lot more. It's such a short form that you're kind of forced to, like, oh God, like really actually look at it.
Right. I think a lot of it is saying something we all say just in a flowery way, and I think people sometimes can't get past that. What is that word? What are they trying to say? What's the context of it? And that can be troublesome. But at the same time, all poets do is say something that you're probably saying too, just in a different way.
Yeah. Or they found the right combination of words, or not even the right combination, but just a certain way that it hits you.
Yeah.
One of my favorite poems is by Dorianne Locks. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. So she was one of the advisors at the MFA program, and she writes this story. I think it was called Snow, and it's basically talking about her sister who was basically like addicted to, I think, heroin. Yeah, I think she was addicted to heroin. And it starts out just so like lovely. It's like her and her friends are leaving a play, and it's like New York City, and it just starts snowing. But then she just goes into this section of like her sister's illness, and it's just so beautifully jarring, and I think it's those kinds of things that some people just don't want to look at.
Right.
And
it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And and I think that's like poems, nowadays, things come with trigger warnings. I think poetry should sometimes.
Yeah.
Because poetry is asking you to do a lot.
It really is.
So,
I try not to put, and I know I should, but I don't put trigger warnings on mine. We didn't have them before, and maybe that's a part of the problem. But I also believe that sort of being thrown into the deep end of a pool is also
absolutely
a good way to go about things.
Yeah.
To learn something.
Oh, yeah.
Just
totally.
to dive in.
Yep. Yeah. You got to, you need Yeah, you need to learn how to swim, and like, sometimes you need like little floaties on to like
Right.
keep you afloat. But for the most part,
And you won't drown in the page. You won't
No.
drown in the page. It's not going to kill you.
you're not gonna. Yeah,
You know?
not just reading it. Yeah,
You'll be fine reading it. You can just close it if you really can't figure it out or whatever. But anyway.
yeah. So funny.
All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up. I've got a question that I always ask people. If there was one story, movie, song, anything creative you wish you wrote, what would it be?
Wow. Okay. If that I wish I wrote. I think it would be Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude.
Yeah?
Yeah. And
I've got questions for you in a second, but
Okay.
go on. I want to know
100
why.
Years of Solitude, I read that in high school. It was some required reading, but I remember like just falling so far into that story. Like, and I remember like just realizing like, wow, like this is what's possible with literature.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's like these worlds that somebody has created, and so I remember just being like so enamored by it. And I even now I will actually remember, I will have memories of what I was doing when I was reading that book, like in life.
That's how much it hit you.
Yeah, like I was like, oh yeah, I remember that day, that afternoon, we were at a pool party of a friend, and I was reading Garcia Marquez at that time, and thinking of how cool it was to be reading that book. Like little things like that, right? And then just recently, again, Netflix. Here I go. I must like a Netflix advert. They came out with actually a quite really well done mini series of 100 Years of Solitude,
Really?
and it's actually legit. Like I watched, it's all in Spanish, and it's pretty good. Like I watched, and it's really fairly close to the novel. They did a really good job with characterization.
I'm gonna have to watch that because I started.
It's good.
That was the first book I tried to read of his, and I'll admit I only got through halfway of it.
Tough. It's a hard book.
Well, I for whatever reason got frustrated with the same character name.
That is tough.
That I couldn't get past that for whatever reason. And I kept having to flip back to the front where there was a family tree, and I'm like, wait, is it this guy or this guy? And then I would lose in the story, and it just got frustrating after a while. I could tell his writing skill and storytelling was fantastic. I just couldn't get past being lost all the time.
It is confusing.
So
100%.
I read recently Until August.
Okay.
I don't know if you've read that one.
No,
that's his. It's a collection. It's not a collection. It's like a short novella.
Posthumous, or
I think so. Yeah, I think it did come out posthumously. It's got even the introduction. I think he wrote it while he was like kind of losing his mind at the later stages of life. So it's like very flawed in a story kind of way. And they went back and forth about releasing it. And I read it recently, and I see what they're talking about, but I was like, oh, okay, now I see why people like him. Yeah. And I want to read more of his stuff. Yeah. I think I just started with the wrong story.
Well, that's the thing. I think 100 Years of Solitude, that's like the porterhouse steak. Like,
right.
When I was like getting really serious about writing, I was like, I'm going to read it was 4 authors. I'm going to read the very first thing they published. And I remember I read Scott Fitzgerald's first short story, Vonnegut's first short story, King's first short story, and Garcia Marquez's first, because I was really inspired by those 4 writers.
Yeah.
And I remember when I read the collection of Garcia Marquez's first short story collection that he got published, that was his first like real published work. That's the stuff that you're like, whoa, I see what he's doing here.
Yeah.
Garcia, 100 Years of Solitude is a much later, like, I think when he was like, you don't want to say he was showing off, but that was like probably like the peak of his Like this was like the best of the best, right? So, and then Love in the Time of Cholera is amazing, but
I need to read that one.
Yeah, those sort of like long, sort of like, I guess epic novel, like where you're talking about different characters and there's so much intertwined, and I think I just love it also because of just his contribution to Latin American literature.
Yeah.
He was such a voice and encapsulated this idea of like, that Latin American culture is such a blend of cultures. It's syncretic. It's it's at the same time, it's like very indigenous, but it's very Catholic, and it's very like European, but also very like native. And there's all these things happening at the same time, and I love that stuff. So,
do you read a lot of international authors? Do you branch out
like
that?
More.
Yeah.
I you know what? I tend to read some of the, I like this sort of like short story form. Like I like Saunders and Steve Almond and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to read more international. Yeah, I tend to read, when I can, I try. Yeah.
I think you and I have very similar reading and writing styles, it seems. I think you would like a lot of Japanese books.
I was going to say, when you said Murakami, I should.
The last 5 or 10 years, I have just been finding every Japanese fiction author I can find and just reading. And some of it's really bad, and some of it's really strange, but it's so good.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about the way they tell stories. And I understand a majority of it is from the translator, what the translator translated it as. But it's so weird. They love cats. They love bookstores.
Yeah, cats. For sure.
And I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah, those are your two.
Yeah, right. Like, so count me in. So
okay, I'm inspired. Yeah, I should. I definitely feel like I should, especially like in that magic realism world, and that idea of like, because I love like anything non-US or just any culture. Like I love it. So,
yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Taylor, this was fun. I'm glad we got to do this.
This is
Thanks
really
for doing
cool.
this.
This is a lot of fun.